Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Best Words. This week, turn up your AC, enjoy it, because we're all dead. Um, Climate change is here. It was 116 degrees in Portland, Oregon last weekend. It was 120 degrees in Pakistan, 118 degrees in Siberia at the Arctic Circle. Climate change, global warming is happening at a speed that is faster than the worst case scenarios scientists were putting out 15 years ago. The time to stop global warming has passed. Anything we do now is, a band-aid on a very, very serious wound. You have these people who say like, well, if India, China, and the US reduce emissions by 30% by 2040, we can still avert the worst impacts of climate change. No, wrong, wrong, sorry, naive. The cold truth is I feel terrible for anybody with young children right now, because you have to tell yourself a bunch of lies to believe that they're gonna live out their natural life. Um, we have a situation now where a couple American cities, let alone world cities, are going to run out of water in the medium term future. Um, Phoenix and Las Vegas might need to be abandoned in a decade, maybe less. 116 degrees is in Portland, Oregon, is astonishing. Now, is it going to be like that every summer? Probably not. Uh, is it going to be like that again this summer? Highly unlikely. But weather patterns have now changed, and they've now gotten dangerous, right? You're going to see heat waves that kill a lot of people. Heat waves in Pakistan and eastern China are going to kill millions of people in the near future. They had to shut down the streetcars in Portland because they were melting. A few years ago, they had to shut down the airport in Phoenix. It was so hot, planes couldn't land on it. I think people have generally underestimated what climate change is going to do to civilization. Um, it's funny. The Republicans' last stand is saying that climate is not a part of infrastructure, and it's almost hilarious. It's almost hilarious because climate proofing our infrastructure is the only chance we have of making it through, through the next 2 or 3 decades with an intact society. And it is fascinating that they're willing to die on that hill. But you know what? Even the people who are officially on our side, it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. We are royally fucked. If we, Carter put solar panels on the White House, and one of the first things Ronald Reagan did is take them down. And Reagan obviously is a giant asshole and one of the worst presidents in American history. But that singular act of taking the solar panels off the White House may be what ultimately dooms humanity. They set alternative energy research back 30 years, 40 years, and I have zero hope that a climate catastrophe can be avoided. Will the human race live on? Yeah, but will civilization as we know it live on? Highly unlikely.
Didn't think you were going to bring up the thing about Reagan, but that's something that I always think about whenever we're talking about climate change is that fucking asshole taking those fucking solar panels off the Carter put up. Yeah, like you're saying, the time it's well past. We're already seeing a lot of the effects of global warming leading to climate change. That's one of the right wings. They love that talking point, right? It was global warming 30 years ago. No, they stopped saying that because that's not what's happening anymore. But it's like, no, actually, global warming leads to climate change. The planet is still warming up slightly, a couple degrees here and there, over the decades, which can have devastating effects. But Jibril, climate change, it's not made by humans, right? The climate always changes.
you
Isn't
know
that
that
true?
that's I'm glad you brought that up. That's one of the most fascinating. The climate, of course, always changes, right? Which is exactly why adding destabilizing factors to it is extra dangerous. We had a mini ice age from about 1300 to 1600, where all of a sudden people in Alexandria in Egypt had to wear fur in the late Middle Ages. People froze to death in like Sicily, places that were moderate before that. Um, yeah, Northern Europe was uninhabitable until 10,000 years ago because of glaciers. Climate does always change. That is a fact. Um, which is not a reason to not take climate change seriously. it's actually a reason to take it much more seriously. We are not just destabilizing a system that's in equilibrium. We are destabilizing a system that is dynamic and always in a state of disequilibrium. One of the reasons humanity developed when it did, as effectively as it did, as I sit here in a city of 8 million people with all these creature comforts, is because we kind of hit a sweet spot climate wise. I mean, hominids have been roaming the earth for 4 million years. The last 10,000 years, after what they called the Younger Dryas, which is like a kind of a mini ice age and then a catastrophic end to that mini ice age, it's been really kind of moderate and habitable. And then so you had river valleys in the Middle East and Egypt that began civilization and yada yada. Here we are today. We were able to build civilization because we were kind of luckily found ourselves in a climate sweet spot. And people who say climate always changes are really taking that for granted, that the climate that they grew up in is going to be here for us. And yes, it's a dynamic system to begin with. So destabilizing it with 200 million years worth of buried carbon in 100 years is it is insane to think that that wouldn't have a catastrophic knock-on effect. You have people who be like, well, it's not that big of a deal. We don't know. The data's not clear, which is absolute bullshit. I mean, we have the Northwest Passage is open, right? Shipping lanes that were 40 years ago weren't there are now easily accessible in the Arctic Circle. So, I mean, that's the only real data point you need.
And they're looking to drill there as much as possible as well. The Russians, I believe.
Yeah.
Let's make it worse.
200 million years of global buried carbon burned in 100 years. There's no way that doesn't end civilization as we know it, if you look at it from that sort of step back, broad perspective.
Well, yeah, that's true. Well, the Industrial Revolution set all this off. Republicans, right-wingers, they like to think that scientists have no idea what they're talking about. But we've studied the climate over millennia and stuff. We know why climate has changed, and it does change, not just from humans, but it changes over long periods of time. We're talking about a period of like 250 years right now. And we're seeing catastrophic effects. Something they always love to talk about, too, is think about the economic damage that you're going to do by trying to switch to green energy or stuff like that. Think about this, guys. Think about the economic damage that's going to happen when you have millions of refugees piling from all these places that are 120 degrees. Just think about the refugee crisis that we have nowadays, and that's usually, due to wars and stuff like that. We're going to have water refugees soon. Just think about the damage that's going to happen when they're trying to pile into countries because they can't live where they come from anymore.
Yeah, it really it upsets me how effective the right-wing attack line, how you're going to pay for the Green New Deal is. And, it's really, I think we only have very few Democrats who truly understand it. The answer to that is not, oh, well, we amortize the bonds, blah, blah. The answer to that is how are you going to pay, how are you going to afford not to do it? How are you going to afford to evacuate Phoenix and Los Angeles 3 years apart? How are you going to afford that? How are you going to afford, the Pacific Northwest burning to the ground? I mean, those are some of the world's last stores of oxygen in rainforests in the Pacific Northwest burning. The size of Ohio went up in flames 2 days ago in British Columbia. How are you going to afford that?
Yeah. The Colorado River is drying up. Fires in California. It's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. But, let's be optimistic. We might join the Paris climate deal again. Or did we already? Are we back in? It doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah.
Something non-binding, right? That's going to save us all.
Well, if India and China don't do anything, we shouldn't be obligated to do anything either. I'm like, wow, that is myopic and stupid. Like,
yeah. Well, what happened to the United States leading the world, huh? We're the leaders of the free world. Shouldn't we take charge? Go first?
You'd think so. But not if you believe all climate action is just self-punishment for no reason. I mean, these people who they see climate action as the equivalent of self-flagellation and whipping yourself. And it's like, no, we're not doing this.
Slicing your Achilles tendon.
It's not a purification.
But our competitors, they're going to get ahead of us if we do that. Well, I got news for you guys. We're gonna die if we don't do something. Okay.
We're gonna die, which brings it to a point I want to talk about the sovereignty in the climate catastrophe world, right? Specifically, Brazil's famous asshole right wing president Jair Bolsonaro. He has said that he will burn down as much of the Amazon as he wants for profit, for beef, and for soybean farms. And he so far has kept his word. The climate burning in the Amazon has picked up, deforestation has picked up to incredibly dangerous rates. It was bad before he got in office, it's worse now. I feel like, that they say that we can't tell them what to do, right? That's colonialism. It's colonialism. And I understand the ugly history of colonialism in the global south, right? But preventing someone from burning down the Amazon is not the same as invading Guatemala 40 years ago so American consumers can get cheap bananas. That was a moral crime. I feel like if we need to use some sort of, well, first international pressure, carrots before sticks, but I think preserving the Amazon, the integrity of the Amazon to the greatest extent possible is a goal that warrants any levers of power, any and all levers of power, I think would be on the table. Um, Even fully acknowledging the ugly history of, you know, colonial involvement in that part of the world. Because the choice is like, clearing land so Brazil can sell beef to McDonald's, and then 5 years later we're all dead. The fate of humanity is literally on the line here. Um, and so it raises some really interesting questions about what's the appropriate course of action, and how do we conceive of borders and sovereignty in a world where it's interconnected environment and the decisions made within national borders impact all of us.
Yeah, I guess it's something that we really have to start talking about seriously. Hopefully, we could get to that point in this country. I'm not very hopeful about it, but um, just on, I guess, the last point that I'd like to just bring up. There's this kind of belief too that we can all, if we all just do our individual part, if we all throw the plastic in the plastic bin, the aluminum in the aluminum in the aluminum bin, and just make sure there's no trash on the floor, we're gonna solve climate change. We're not. That's nice. Do it. It's great. Hey, keep your community clean. That's not going to actually help the problem. The problem is we have gigantic corporations, which are the huge culprits in climate change. They are the ones, the agriculture business, the oil business. They dump a ton of carbon into the atmosphere. And this isn't an individual problem, okay? So you have to think beyond just what individually you could do in your own life to help, but also how politically we have to stop these monsters and these machines from just taking over and destroying the ecosystem that we all rely on.